Welcome everyone to the WMMA Washington, D.C. Fly-In Informational Webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm Dan Bonds, Director of Public Policy for WMMA. And first, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask a question as we go through the webinar, please type it into the chat box located on the right side toolbar. You'll find that on your the panel section there under sharing webcam, audio, and chat as well. Attendees are in listen-only mode, and this webinar is being recorded and will be available for download on the WMMA website. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. With us today, we have T.R. Herzog, Chair of the Public Policy Committee, and Tony Sutton, Vice Chair of the Public Policy Committee. So really quickly, going through the agenda, we're going to review why you should participate in the fly-in, what happens during those fly-ins, how do you request meetings with congressional offices, and top public policy topics for the association. So let's talk a little bit about why you should participate. First and foremost, participating in a fly-in elevates your status in the industry and WMMA. It helps you understand how Congress and public policy works. This policy, as you know, with what's come out of 2017 and how Congress affects your daily businesses, this type of policy really affects how you perform in your business and what you do on a day-to-day basis. Things like the Tax Cut and Jobs Act or any other legislation that affects manufacturing, both U.S. and international. It helps elevate WMMA efforts to positively impact the industry. Without your support, I have to say that none of the fly-in, all of the efforts that we make during the fly-in to prep on public policy issues, meet with the correct staff and members, many of them from your district, and also ones that are on key committees that affect U.S. manufacturing, as well as any of the other caucuses, the Manufacturing Caucus, the Career and Technical Education Caucus as well. And lastly, there's no cost for Public Policy Committee and board members to attend the fly-in. You register, book your own travel, and then you submit for reimbursement afterwards. So really, it's a question of course, your time being very valuable. Can you spend a couple days away from the office, away from your families, and make sure that you can make that kind of commitment before you decide to participate. Briefly, the fly-in program also includes meetings with your members of Congress and their staff or their staff, briefing sessions on key pieces of legislation that are active in Congress, and of course, what the association legislative priorities are, as well as networking with your peers from across the country, many of whom that you only get to see a handful of times. This really gives another touch point to share best practices and find out how your colleagues are doing. So what also happens during a fly-in? I'm going to kick it over to Tony to talk a little bit about the schedule of events that happen during the fly-in. Tony?
Well, thanks, Dan. Quite a bit is planned for the upcoming the fly-in. On Tuesday, February 27th, we kick it off with our WMMA Public Policy Committee meeting. And at that meeting, we're going to be discussing various items from our Public Policy Task Force, all towards generating how we can generate more influence in the public policy process, how we can generate more influence in Washington to see issues that are important to us actually become public policy, become law. And so after that committee meeting, do a little social event. We're going to take a bus tour of the D.C. monuments, and then we'll break out into small groups to have dinner on our own. Wednesday's a big day. Wednesday is the day in which we're going to do the congressional Hill visits, meet with our members of Congress and or their staffs. We'll kick it off with a breakfast, including a featured speaker, and then we're going to go over to the Hill. And that's the fun part. You actually get to meet with members of Congress, to meet with their staffs, talk about what's important to your company, what's important to our industry, what's important to our association, and frankly, what's important to this country. Things like cutting taxes, cutting regulation, things like vocational technical training, how to increase the funding for that, how to increase that so we can have more workers to meet the shortage, the skilled labor shortage. Very important meetings, very impactful meetings, believe me. Then we have a dinner in which we do a debriefing of the events of the day, and so we can exchange information about how things went. And not only is it a fun time, it's actually very informative to learn what people are from across the country have talked about with their elected officials. It really gives us a sense of where people are on these issues. And I can't emphasize enough that how important these kinds of meetings are into setting the public policy agenda. The congressmen, senators really do listen to the people from back home, and these visits are very important.
Great. This is T.R. Herzog. I am the chairman of the Public Policy Committee, and uh, happy to be joined by Dan and Tony today, and all of you that are participating live with us. And in addition, anyone who may listen to this recording archived on the WMMA website. Um, so how do you request meetings with your congressional offices? I know that I've been going to fly-ins probably since around 2010, and everyone gets easier, and particularly since you get a pretty good number of incumbents. You can develop relationships with these offices and kind of pick up the conversation where you left off from your last visit. With the advent of email, that's really going to be your best way to let your elected officials know that we're coming. And there's a scheduler in each office who's kind of the gatekeeper. That's going to be the best person. And in many cases, it'd be good early and often. You'll see the last bullet on this slide. There's a fly-in spreadsheet that's a Google Doc. And you can check that before you even start, just so there's no overlap or redundancy. If this is one of your first fly-ins, even though it's really just talking and building relationships, which as business owners and executives we all do every day, there's really nothing scary about it. But you may choose to tag along with somebody who is more of a fly-in veteran, even if it's to see an official that may not be from your home district. You'll also see, if you study the spreadsheet, that we've had good fortune in recent years of not only calling on people from where we live, but also going horizontally and getting into things like the manufacturing caucus. Obviously, they're speaking the same language and they're passionate about the same issues that we are. A couple of those officials are from the state of Ohio and the state of New York. And it's been really great to have a dialogue with them and get their insight as to what the issues are and in ways that we can get traction and move the ball to get things done. So in some cases, we may already know the staff at the office that you're seeking the appointment. Otherwise, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Dan Bond. If it's difficult at all to locate the scheduler for the office that you're seeking, in many cases, every member of Congress has a website and their staff may be listed there. In some cases, there's a form that you can submit and they'll get back to you. I have found that if you can get a specific email address of a person, it's a little easier to make sure that it doesn't fall through the cracks. And then we do have, you can give in the email an idea of who our association is and what issues are important to us. You can imagine that these offices are called on year-round by uh, trade associations of all shapes and sizes, all of whom feel that their issues are uh, the most important, and so it's up to us to kind of cut through the clutter and um, I guess motivate these offices to understand why they should put a priority on the things that we're talking about. We have templates that could be helpful to you, even though the email doesn't have to be very lengthy. I mean, if they know that even the name of our association kind of tells the story that we're making wood machinery in America. We are small businesses, and we want to talk about issues that are important to that group. Um, Being a constituent will help. I mean, unless you generally want maybe 4 weeks notice, you don't want to do it right at the last minute. But especially if they know that you are from their home district. In many cases, if you are a business owner who has employees that are eligible to vote, um, they that gives the office plenty of reasons to meet with you, hear your story, which is really what they like. They like to talk about macro trends, but I think what really gets attention is when you can give stories of how this policy is affecting real people. And a lot of times that's what they can take back to their committees and try to make things happen. And again, throughout the process, I'd suggest at the very beginning, before you even start contacting offices, and then during and even at the end, go ahead and check that spreadsheet. That's a shared document that's updated in real time, and that will give you an idea of our progress and maybe even meetings that you can dovetail into. Having 2 or 3 WMMA members at a meeting is helpful because that keeps the conversation going. We can talk from different perspectives, and maybe what one person might overlook, the other person can interject with. And then Dan, if you could go ahead and advance the slide. Excellent. On to our top public policy topics. Pleased to report, nothing is ever permanent in Washington. So even though we were able to get tax reform passed, which is fantastic, it's something that we need to keep in the conversation. They need to, Congress needs to realize how important this is to small business, and we worked so hard to get it passed that we don't want to lose the progress that we've made. And if you're not too familiar, the new law will be first applied to 2018 taxes. A big component of this, which the National Association of Manufacturers has been lobbying for a long time, we finally got that corporate tax rate down from 35% to 21%. That's going to help businesses like WMMA members reinvest those hard-earned profits into future growth, reward their employees in some cases. The benefits are just, almost infinite. And then lastly, the AMT for corporations has been eliminated. That was a positive step that we've been asking for a long time. Now, just hoping that we can kind of duplicate that effort on healthcare. Any of you who are business owners or even decision makers within your company know that healthcare in the United States is the most expensive in the world, and it makes it hard to be competitive when we want to take care of our employees. The individual mandate is still something that's being discussed. It's going to take some bipartisan cooperation probably to get anything meaningful done. And with the midterm elections coming up, great time to be going to Washington and really hammering away at this so that it's an issue on the campaign trail, and hopefully we'll have great turnout in November to put people in power that can enact meaningful change. CTE is career technical education. We've talked a lot about the skills gap, that by 2025 there are studies that there will be millions of jobs that are unfilled. to support all of this growth that we've been working so hard for. That really starts even at the middle school level. We have to get to young people and kind of change their perception about careers in manufacturing and how they can use STEM skills. In many cases, to have even white collar front office jobs over a manufacturing plant with a lot of advancement opportunities and with a very good family living wage. And part of CTE is the reauthorization of the Perkins Act. In the vast scheme of Washington finances, it's not a lot of money, but it's one way that it goes back to the 1980s, and it's definitely a way that the federal government can make some resources available to go to the state and local level and focus on that all-important skills training. The other thing you can do too, which doesn't necessarily have to do with a Washington fly-in, but our members that are having the best success are literally partnering with their high schools. And you can talk to several members of the committee. I know Jamie Scott up in Connecticut has done a great job with this. And, in some cases, you could even invite students to be interns at your company. You could open your doors for manufacturing day. Building some awareness and trying to create interest in manufacturing as a career, so that as this group of volunteers goes through our career and eventually retires, that we'll have a next generation coming behind us and ready to pick up where we left off. Other topics include promoting exports. The Export-Import Bank has been something that has been discussed in recent years. And also the recent passage by the House of the miscellaneous tariff bill. So, it's great to, in many cases, you might get a photo opportunity with the elected official themselves, particularly senators who can be very busy. You might meet with somebody who is a kind of a subject matter expert on tax or business within that office, and or maybe a legislative director or a senior legislative aide. And that's great, because those are the people that are really setting the agenda for the elected official anyway, and educating them on issues and what position they want to take. And I've really enjoyed building relationships with those types of people, and they're just like us. I think they're trying. They believe that America is the best country in the world, but we still have lots of room for improvement in working together, and they like to get feedback from real people, especially in an election year. So with that said, I think I appreciate everyone's attention, and I'll hand it back to Dan.
Thanks so much, TR. Before I move on to the new slide, I just ask that you continue to send in your questions. I know we have a couple that have already come in. It's on the chat feature. You could send it to any of the panelists or to everyone, but we'll get to those questions after we finish up here the next couple slides. So you're listening to a little bit about the agenda, sort of what you expect if you come to a fly-in. So you've made the decision, sitting on the phone today, to attend, and you'd like to know what to do. First and foremost, send an email to myself or Diane. Dan@WMMA.org would be the fastest way to do that. Let us know that you'd like to register. Figure out from what part of the country that you need to travel from. You book your own airfare. You don't need a car here in Washington, D.C. Everything is pretty accessible by taxi or metro or bus, or however you like to travel here in the metro area. Let us know how many days you'd like to be in town for. We went over sort of a blueprint of what this fly-in is going to be. We'll have an expectation for attendees to fly into the area, come into the area earlier in the day. We'll have a public policy committee meeting that afternoon, and then a bus tour of the monuments. The next day is quite packed with a breakfast and speaker, as well as all of your hill visits. And then please plan to travel the next day after we go out as a group for dinner and do a debrief on what people heard from individual meetings and sort of formulate how WMMA is going to move forward. Most importantly, as much as booking your own airfare, is contacting your congressional offices. As TR mentioned, it takes a few weeks, sometimes longer, in order to get in front of the right person. Many of these members have a large number of constituents who are all asking for time or focus or different topics of interest. It's very important to start contacting them now in order to go through the process of setting some time up. Even if you can set up time, it might, as you lay out your day, it might start to get a little crowded, moving over from the Senate to the House to the Senate to the House and back and forth. So try to book those meetings early on with staff. And of course, if you're not already a member of the Public Policy Committee, I ask that you join now. We have a great group of people, certainly a very well experienced and engaged chair and vice chair, and really it's one of the best committees to really affect the industry and have a positive impact on your day-to-day business. So that's pretty much all that we've had for the going through the webinar today. I'll wait just a few seconds to let the last-minute questions come in. But please, if you haven't had a chance already, use the chat function to ask your questions, and we can run through some of those right now. So first question, what should I bring to these Hill meetings? That's a great question. First and foremost, you should show up early. Many of you are already operating under the assumption that early is on time is late, and if you're late, don't bother showing up at all. Certainly show up at least 5 minutes early. Many of the members have waiting rooms where staff sit in the front and greet you and let the appropriate staffer know that you're here. Secondly, and almost as important as showing up early or certainly not late, bring a business card. As you know, there are people out there, 320 million, 330 million people. Some of them don't have the best intentions when they come and visit an elected official. So they want to know who you are and who you represent before they call the person to come to the meeting. So please bring enough business cards. And lastly, we'll be able to put together, and we'll be doing this over the next few weeks before we meet in DC for the Public Policy Committee meeting, be able to put together an updated issue brief on corporate tax reform, as TR noted, healthcare reform, as well as CTE funding, career and technical education. So those are some good leave behinds if you have a chance to not only educate yourself, but also the staff person or the member that you're meeting with, in order to let them know these are the issues that are of most importance to you as a member of WMMA, and also what you'd like them to do. So we'll go over the ask of what you're going to ask the staff person when they say, what would you like me to do for you today? So the next question along the lines is, who should take the lead in these meetings? This is another great question. I think it really all depends on who you're meeting with. Obviously, handing over your business card, they'll know who you are. You'll have a time set. If you're meeting with a member, their time is very valuable. So certainly let that person take the lead. If you're meeting with a staff person who maybe looks more to you on what you'd like to talk about, certainly do that, but really play it by ear. These are the people that can positively impact legislation certainly the staff person and especially the member if you get a chance to meet. So let them take the lead when it comes to whether they want you to talk or whether they'd like to talk a little bit about whatever they'd like to talk about. TR, Tony, do you have any thoughts on your experience? You've been to many fly-ins and have taken many meetings with members and staff.
Thanks, Dan. This is TR. One thing from a logistical standpoint that you just learn from doing it, the congressional office buildings are separated by the Capitol building and the lawn in front of it. And the walk back and forth, especially when the weather's nice, is very patriotic and picturesque. But especially if you have a meeting, let's say, in one of the two Senate office buildings, and then your next meeting during the day is across the lawn at one of the House office buildings, of which I believe there are 4. You wouldn't want those meetings to be scheduled any closer than an hour apart, just to give yourself some time to relocate. There are metal detectors at the entrance to each of these buildings, so it takes just a little bit of time to get through that. In most cases, you would drop your keys and maybe take your belt off, but as long as it's not maybe the first meeting of the day or lunch, there's not a big line. But just give yourself enough time to get around and kind of enjoy it.
I think TR is right. I think people, though, should also not be intimidated by this process. Not be and not let that dissuade you from contacting a member of Congress. It's really not that complicated. You can go to their website, as TR indicated earlier. You call the scheduler or send an email through their schedule request. Many of the congressmen have scheduling requests sites on their website, and you'll be surprised that they will get back to you. You might have to make a phone call or two sometimes, but for the most part, they do get back to you. They are interested in meeting with constituents. They are interested in meeting with business people, and so it's not as difficult as you might think to arrange a meeting. Really, it's a matter of you taking the time to do this, and it is important. It really is amazing how a small group of people can affect public policy, and they need to see, from our perspective, what's important to our industry, because if we're not advocating for it, who will?
Thanks so much, Tony and TR. Next question, why is Congress so dysfunctional? Well, probably not going to answer that one, but certainly WMMA and you should look to meet with folks on both sides of the aisle. I think that in 2018, it's important to get support, certainly for issues like CTE that have bipartisan support, to find a way in which to get it done. That's certainly the easiest way in order to accomplish something on the policy side. But certainly, even if, just as a general rule of thumb, even if you go into a member's office that you might not support all of their policy positions, they're taking the time to meet with you. You should certainly feel like you should express your views, especially if you're a constituent, in a polite and cordial manner. Not everyone's going to have the same viewpoint, and that's the beauty of policy, and certainly Washington, D.C. And we really have an opportunity as an association to build rapport and to build credibility on both sides of the aisle, because one party's not going to be in power forever. Things change quickly, and we want to make sure that we have great relations with both sides as well. And it looks like we have one more question coming in. What is the best way to get from the House to the Senate side and vice versa? That's a great question, because it's a little bit too far to walk unless you have maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I certainly recommend that if it's a nice day out and not too cold, that you take a walk across the Capitol, see the dome and the expanse there. as you walk from the House to the Senate side or vice versa. But there are taxi queues. You could just line up and jump in a taxi. If you have a car sharing service like Lyft or Uber, those are also easy to get to. You could just call a car and jump in as well. Those types of things are as you look at your schedule, those types of things are needed to be factored into the time. As Tony and TR mentioned, each building has its own security and metal detector. And if there's a long line in front, it will take a little bit of time to get inside the building. So please plan accordingly.
It looks like we have a few additional questions in the questions tab as well.
Okay, Jen, do you want to read those out and we can
Sure,
we can take a look at them?
Yeah. Our first question is, how much time are we requesting for the meeting?
Well, that's a great question. Usually it's about 30 minutes. If you can get an hour of time, certainly take it. But typically for introductions and to get everyone back and staff to go through an issue, 30 minutes is generally the rule of thumb. If you can get an hour, if you know your member of Congress or you know their staff very well, sometimes you can get a little bit longer time. But these types of meetings happen very frequently and from a wide range of constituents and associations, as well as companies that are doing their own DC fly-ins. So don't be offended if a staffer needs to get up or a member needs to get up and take a vote on the floor, or a staff person needs to jump into another meeting or something else that's going on. The day is just not long enough to help out everyone who wants their time.
Great. Our next question is, what is the recommended dress code, i.e. a company logo polo shirt, and what about for women?
Business attire is always acceptable. A jacket with a collared shirt is usually great. Some people will wear a shirt and tie. That's certainly acceptable too. Many of the staffers and members, of course, will be wearing suits. For women, just business attire is absolutely fine as well. It's whatever you feel comfortable in. But know that if you wear ripped jeans and cut off t-shirt, you probably will not blend in all that well, especially on a cold February day. Along those lines too, many of you see the WMMA logo on the bottom right of the PowerPoint. We were able to get lapel pins, which we'll hand out at the public policy meeting and the next morning at the breakfast as well. So any type of outfit, if you'd like to wear the lapel pin, we'll be passing those out too. It just gives a good professional air for folks that are representing the association and going into taking these meetings with staff. That's something that we've decided to do and put money towards from the association.
Our next question is, will WMMA provide a brief on any pending legislation that we might specifically address?
Yes, absolutely. And that'll be done at the Public Policy Committee meeting, which is 3 to 5 p.m. Coming up on the first day that I think it's 27th, February 27th, when we get to DC. That'll be a time to go over all of the issue papers, not just current legislation. So things like healthcare and other things that have taken a little bit of a backseat to other topics of interest. We'll also go over those as well and answer any questions that members might have.
Next question is, what is the protocol for bringing gifts or other items besides the leave behind items? Is it generally frowned upon?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a gift rule. I'll have to look through the regulations. I believe there's a limit to the amount that you can give for staff, but I would just, if you're going to give a gift, I wouldn't do it in this setting. I don't think it's not something that I see regularly. But TR, Tony, welcome your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I guess, Dan, the best thing to do would be to see if there are any official regulations on it. A few meetings I've gone to, I don't think I've ever personally carried anything, but maybe another member that I was with brought something from the home district, like a candy bar or something from that's prominent in that area, but nothing that would be construed as anything trying to gain bribery or undue influence.
Right. They have ethics rules that prohibit gifts over a certain amount, and I think it's certainly not expected. And as TR said, I think if it was something like something from the home district that's reflective of, that has sort of a de minimis value, but I don't think it's really necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And whoever asked that question, if you want to shoot me a note and tell me what the specific gift is, I could do a little research and see what that de minimis value is, so we don't run into any questions of ethics or things like that.
Great. Our next question is, what if you are late for a meeting? Do you call and let them know you are on the way? Is there a point where you should call and cancel, i.e. after being 15 minutes late?
So that's a good question. First, I would certainly call. And nobody likes to be late to a meeting, obviously, but if things happen and you're caught up or you can't, you're detained for some reason, please do call the office. As an alternative, you could also ask a colleague to take the meeting for you. If there's someone who's already on the House side and you're meeting with Congresswoman Smith and you can't make it, you could certainly reach out to someone else who's also on the House side during the fly-in and see if they could take the meeting as well. But a 15-minute rule applies to business. It certainly applies to the Hill as well. If you're going to be 15 minutes late, you might want to apologize and say, I'm sorry, I'm caught up. I got caught up, but I can't make it. But certainly call the office, make sure that they know that you're not going to be able to make it. Apologize and see if there's a way in which you can reschedule when you're free.
And our last question is, should you take notes during a meeting?
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to be taking meetings probably with at least a half dozen offices. It's good to know that. We'll go over all the topics and things that you heard about from staff. These are the types of meetings where you hear about policy decisions and pieces of legislation that are being drafted and being worked on, and something that the group we're going to share with each other when we do a dinner debrief after the Hill visits. So please do bring a notepad, bring a binder, bring something in which you can take these notes, and then we'll be able to share those when we do the debrief later that day.
Yep. Photo ops are also great, particularly if you get to meet a member personally. That can be used in newsletters or social media.
Yeah, that's great. And if you do have time with a member, that's certainly not out of the question for you to ask for a photo op. That's almost expected. Well, great, Jen. If that's all the questions, I just wanted to thank everyone on the call today. I want to thank our speakers, TR Herzog, Chair of the Public Policy Committee, Tony Sutton, Vice Chair of the committee, and Jen for running this. I look forward, if you have any questions, please email me, dan@wmma.org. But I look forward to seeing everyone later this month in Washington, D.C. Thank you, everyone.